An aircraft carrier built for war just left the world's hot zones and sailed into the Caribbean. If this was only about smugglers, why move one of 3 deployed supercarriers into a counterdrug beat? You're being told interdiction. The Ford's air wing says strike. In the next minutes, I'll show you what that shift really signals: a bow drawn tight toward mainland targets, the regime in Venezuela on notice, and cartels within reach. Stay, and you'll see how a carrier built for land and sea attack changes the Caribbean from transit route to primary strike theater. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great! Thank you so much. Now, back to the video. If this is about smugglers, why move a supercarrier that can project hundreds of strike sorties into a region the Coast Guard polices daily? The declared mission reads counter-narcotics near Venezuela. The tool is USS Gerald R. Ford with a full air wing and escorts. That is a floating airbase, not a patrol craft. You don't bring a stadium to referee a pickup game. You bring it when you want the option to run a full season. Fast boats, semi-submersibles, handoffs at night, those are cat-and-mouse problems. The Ford's design solves a different class of problem: long-range precision strikes, electronic attack, battle management. It carries the switchboard and the fists.
Now, Venezuela is accusing the U.S. Navy of boarding a fishing boat in Venezuelan waters. A statement from the Foreign Ministry says 18 people carrying long-range weapons boarded a tuna fishing boat and occupied it for 8 hours.
Tension is rising in that region as the U.S. bolsters the Caribbean with military. There were 5 F-35 fighter jets that arrived over the weekend.
Now, the official also says the incident happened in international waters and did not last 8 hours. The U.S. official says the crew of the Navy ship received information about the Venezuelan boat carrying drugs, but didn't find any drugs during the search.
Think of the Archer. The deck is the stance, stable and wide. The air wing is the quiver. The string is drawn, not toward open water chases, but toward nodes on land, radar heads, airfields, depots, transfer sites that feed the flow. For interdiction, the playbook is known. P-8A Poseidon hunts with wide area sensors. Coast Guard cutters board, search, and seize. Maritime patrol aircraft and MH-60 teams spot, chase, and stop. They are tuned for find fix follow at sea. A carrier wing brings a different tool set: F/18 strike packages with standoff effects, EA-18G Growler jamming to smother hostile emitters, E-2D Advanced Hawkeye to stitch a clean air picture and direct the fight. Run a notional strike ladder. E-2D lifts first and paints the theater. Growlers push next, blind radars, and flood comms. Hornets roll in from range with standoff weapons, shaping a window where sensors go dark and logistics freeze. That stack is built for defended airspace. Not skiffs. Carriers don't show up by accident. The Navy usually keeps several forward, and pulling one from Europe or the Middle East telegraphs a priority shift and risk acceptance elsewhere. You move the Queen when you want lanes open and pressure felt. So the real question is simple: what becomes reachable when a Ford-class parks in the Caribbean? Coastal radars. Airbases. Transfer hubs. The carrier is not a net for fish, it's a hammer for hardened targets. It signals readiness to hit state or state-aligned actors onshore. Meanwhile, the map changes when you trace combat radius circles from the flight deck to the Venezuelan coast and inland nodes. Draw the range rings: coastline depots, radar sites, airfields, cartel logistics hubs slide inside the circle. From the deck, you can trace arcs that clip ports, fuel farms, and relay nodes tied to the flow inland. The map tightens fast.
what the U.S. officials are saying is that no, that actually was on international waters. And so you can see a lot of the discrepancies here, Ike. Those facts matter, and we'll see where it goes from here. But there's no doubt that the tension overall is rising. You know, the Venezuelan government says that that happened within its economic exclusion zone. In other words, essentially on its territory on the ocean.
Now, the Trump administration says the people on board were drug traffickers and members of that Aragua gang, but they haven't provided any further details.
Carrier aviation stretches that reach with layers. Tanker support keeps Hornets on station longer and pushes the edge of their combat radius. Standoff munitions let them launch outside dense defenses and still hit with precision. ISR from E-2D builds a shared air picture, while Allied sensors feed cues on emitters and movement. Escorts add maritime Tomahawk shooters, giving a parallel land attack path without committing jets. The brief says interdiction. The stack says strike options. You see windows to hit mainland infrastructure that props up regime protection and cartel throughput, not just boats at sea. That gap between words and loadouts matters. Think of the Caribbean as a chessboard. The carrier is a forward queen, backed by bishops offshore. It threatens lines across the board without moving, and every move ashore must account for that pressure. Notional target sets are straightforward under deterrence and disruption. Air defense radars that sweep the coast. Coastal SAM batteries that guard approach lanes. Military airbases that host fighters and lift. High-value storage and transfer sites tied to trafficking networks. You don't need occupation to make those systems pause. First night, the playbook is methodical. EA-18G suppresses and deceives emitters. Hornets release standoff effects like JSOW-class glide and JSSM-style cruise profiles to cut power, crater runways, and wreck loading gear. Escorts fire TLAM to break sensor nodes and command links. The goal is simple: blind, mute, stall logistics. No flags planted. Law and politics frame the trigger. The Senate did not pass a measure to block future strikes in Venezuela, and the justification offered leans on the president's claim of defensive authority under the Constitution. Lawmakers raised concerns about transparency around targets and briefings, which shapes what gets approved. Shift a carrier here and you accept risk elsewhere. Europe and the Mideast lose presence while the Caribbean gains leverage if escalation comes. The carrier turns a transit route into a launch pad, deterrence with near-term land attack ready. The platform can do it. The only question is whether leadership authorizes it, and on what timeline. A supercarrier on a counterdrug beat is the tell. You don't park a floating airbase to chase skiffs, you stage prepared power aimed at mainland nodes that change behavior fast. So what would you do with that leverage? Where do the first non-kinetic and kinetic hits land to freeze networks without kicking off a regional firestorm? Comment your choice below and subscribe for the full mission breakdown. The bow is drawn. The quiver is full. You're looking at deterrence with real teeth and a short fuse. If you want the tactical mindset behind these moves, subscribe and join a community that seeks to understand the realities of modern conflict.